now that we have the basics set up, we will go into actually styling the website. So, again, it's these areas in the dashboard that you will deal with most frequently when you're designing the website. First thing would be to add a logo, and in order to do that, you go into edit, you go into editing the site header. You'll notice that every web page is made up of the header, the footer, they're the static sections across the website, and then the actual page content is made up of several sections, which we will come to shortly. But first thing first, add the logo. In order to do that, you hover over that, you click on the pen, and you will add your image file. So I just created that quickly for the sake of demonstration. Normally in a branding identity kit, you will get a horizontal logo and a version that will fit within a square. So I would generally suggest using the longer horizontal logo in the header area, and then you could use the square one in the footer, or the round one. Now you'll be given the option to adjust the height, and I usually find the mobile logo is always a bit small, the default 30 pixels, so I'll always bring this up to about 50 and then see what it looks like. So we will save that, and you can always check that out in the mobile view in the editor. That is something that you will always have to check as you design, but we'll come back to that. And then you can add various elements to the menu, such as a button, or some people like having a button for the contact option. I personally think the button is a little bit clunky. I mean, you can style it, each to their own, of course. You can add social links. Again, I'm not a big fan of them in the desktop menu, but what I'll often do is I will activate them here, and then I will put in some code into the CSS editor, where we can hide them in the desktop version. But they always look quite nice in the mobile menu because they're usually neatly displayed down here. So they can look quite nice in the mobile menu. Okay, so there are other elements you can have, such as the cart if it's e-com, and you can style this as well. You might be having a membership account, a membership website, and therefore the login is pretty important. Anyway, I will remove these for now to keep it simple. And one of the most fundamental things you have to do at the beginning is to set up your color palette and fonts. And in order to do this, I mean, if you've already developed your branding well, then you will know the exact shades you want to use. Sometimes it's a good idea to have a test page, style test. And another thing, it should be mentioned, your menu will be made up of the pages under the main navigation. So you can capitalize these. There is another way to make sure they're capitalized in the styling sections, but you'll see anything we add here will become part of the menu. And then now I'll tell you something. It depends on the target audience, because older people like a home link, but generally I think people nowadays intuitively know that the logo will always bring you home. So instead of taking up header real estate, I always bring it down. I always bring the home page into the not linked, because this will always bring us home. Now, going back to the style testing, I will just add a section here. Again, Squarespace give us lots of options for pre-populated content, but I normally start with a blank. And you also need to add sections into the footer area. Sometimes these can be quite useful, but again, I will go blank. Now, to give you a sense, okay, so in order to add some text, we will add a block. Choose the text block, and we can put our headings here. So heading 1 and heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, and then just to compare to see how they sit, you could do you'll notice that I'm just duplicating those blocks, so the duplicate button is there. So we'll call this paragraph 1, and we will set it as paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. paragraph 3. Okay, so okay. Okay, so that's to give us an example of the styles. Now, of the fonts. Now, to set the color palette, you go into Site Styles up here. And again, Squarespace have done a lot of pre-packaging options. I would say choose your own. You may already have, ideally you will have your colors already worked out. On most websites, I would suggest keeping the white and keeping the black, because even if you decide you're not going to have a black website or any black in the colors in your website, it's still useful to have when you're adding darker tints, overlays into banner images, if you want to make the text pop. But they will give you options to, there are plenty of preset palettes to choose from, but ideally you will have your own already worked out. Of course, you can try one and then realize that's not what you want, and then you can change it. I think for the sake of simplicity here, I will use a pre-made. And then on each section, so you have all these different presets going from lightest 1 up to darkest 2. So they take the colours you've set and they pre-populate all the settings. They are things you may want to tweak over time, but okay, so we will come out of that. You need to save it to make sure it sticks. And with the fonts, again, you choose your font here. Now, again, they've got preset packs if you need a starting point. Sans serif means the plainer, cooler ones, more modern, without any decoration. And then the serif fonts are the more classic with a little bit of, the fancy G's, and it's quite fashionable nowadays to have a mix of the classic, usually a serif heading, and a plainer paragraph. I generally do not go for the preset ones. I will normally set those separately, and you've got plenty of options. I think we'll go with a serif. Okay, we'll go for that, and then you can add different weights, and you may also want to make some of these slightly bigger. Oh, I didn't actually set that as heading 4. Okay, so we will, you've got all sorts of options there. Now, in order to go back into the actual page here, anyway, that gives you a sense of scale. Now, I think obviously you can change the paragraph font to in their default. I would say there's a bit of an issue here with the paragraph fonts not being very different in size. So paragraphs, Arial, classic web font. See, we only have, I would bring the paragraph 2 down to 1, and then I would bring paragraph 3. I mean, okay, we'll leave it at that for now. And we'll leave it at Arial for now, seeing as this is just a demo site, but you have so many fonts to choose on. I mean, you could spend 2 days on that, playing around. There are options, while you can only have 2 main fonts for the website, there are coding hacks if you wanted to, say, make heading 1 a different font outside of your font settings, but we'll come to that later on. And sorry, just to go back into the page editor, we need to close that down. We need to exit. Okay. I'm sorry, I thought I had set this at 3, but to show you the difference. Okay, as a rule of thumb, I generally don't use much of paragraph 1, but sometimes it can be useful. And paragraph 2 is obviously for the main body, for the main paragraph text. Paragraph 3 I find very useful if you're putting titles below images or icons, or for the footer section of the website. Now, in order to add color or to change the color palette for your section, you go into Edit, Colors, and we can set that the warmer tone there. Now, because of the header settings, the header, there is one option which it's a default. It will naturally take the background of the first section. So if you want to change that, you go up to your header and Edit Design, and not only does this allow you change the color, so adaptive, it will adapt to whatever your section is, and that is also, if you put a background image on the first section, it will take on the background image too. You might have a gradient. Or solid. And that allows you set the colors. You can also go off piste from your color palette and set something quite random. I mean, not really what I would recommend, but just for a bit of fun, let's do that. Okay, so we'll save that, and then of course you can change the layout. There are many options, but I generally stick with this one. But you know, you have to see what works best. And the drop shadow is to give a little bit of a lift underneath. You can see it there. I normally don't go for that, but you can tone it down. Okay, so you can also add a border. You can fix it. If you fix it, it will not disappear. It will always be, you'll always be able to see it as you scroll down the page, which can be useful. But I would say, and a very important note on this, when you are designing your website, always remember that at least half of traffic nowadays comes through mobile devices. So it's very important to have the website navigationable vertically as well as horizontally. So as you know, instead of having people rely on only going up to the main menu, which can be annoying in a mobile, having to click up to the mobile menu to jump around the website, it's always best to have little options going down through the pages, like a little intro to another page, and then click, you know, a learn more button or a discover, and that brings you over to the other page, just to help with the flow and the user experience throughout the website. And okay, so, and you'll notice in today's websites, generally people avoid they avoid white backgrounds. People love a bit of warmth and texture, but that is and I always think it's nice to have contrast. Okay. So that is how you would set up the initial styling of the website. And okay, so I think we'll leave it at that for now.